All right, welcome back, everyone, to the final end game. I guess there can only be one end game of Coffeehouse Blunders, the Queen's Gambit breakdown. As always, I am James the Montemagno, chess expert, as Danny once told me on the internet, so
Yes,
it makes
sir.
it official. And as always, one of my best friends in the entire world, international chess master and chief chess officer of chess.com, Danny Rensch. Danny, how's it going?
Oh man, it is going great, and once again, an incredible intro by the guy that is the voice and the host of this show and Batman by Night. I will say, once you say it on the internet, it's official. So you are a chess expert, and you delivered yet again here in our prep for this final episode. But dude, you already know I'm pumped. I won't repeat things I said off air until it's appropriate to say them on air now that we're recording. But I will just say that I binged yet again last night, episode 6 and 7, because I wanted to watch episode 7. But Shauna had not seen episode 6. So that means I watched episode 6 and 7 again. I have now seen episode 6 4 times, which, as good as that episode is, I'm good now. I've now seen it enough times, but I am super pumped to talk about episode 7.
But you're done. So you're done. You're done.
Yeah, and I'm not done in a bad way. It honestly, again, like made me appreciate everything I said in last week's episode. So I won't say it again, but just, the Anya Taylor-Joy's, just her, like the way she did chess. And actually my wife taught me something about episode 6 that I didn't know. Cause I was saying like, hey, look, when she does this, like, that's a little awkward, but like, look how confident and smooth, like she really became a real chess player. And Shauna said, which I didn't know, Anya Taylor-Joy's background is actually as a dancer, even before her acting career blew up. And that the way she approached her prep for the Queen's Gambit as an actress was she treated every chess game like it was a choreographed dance scene. So what she did was memorize all of the moves, not even so much as like the chess, right? But just literally from like how she was going to play the moves, how she was going to play the pieces, and the way her body language was going to be at the board. I didn't know that. So Shauna told me that she, because of her background in dance, that's the approach she took to all of the chess scenes, treating them like they were a choreographed kind of dance segment from start to finish. So interesting fact.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I did not know that. Yeah, I was informed as well of some facts that we missed by my wife. Wife's, I just told Heather, I said, you should just do the podcast with Shauna. I don't know why we're doing
why we're doing this.
But we open up on a flashback, as we do on every episode of the Queen's Gambit, basically. Not to mention that it's we do get flashbacks of Beth's past. In the very beginning, the very first episode, we actually get a flashback to Paris. So they kind of continue this trend. Now this gives us a lot more insight into Beth and Alice, her mom herself. Alice driving to Beth's dad's house where he is remarried with children, attempting to give back Beth. And, as they drive away and her dad says, no, get out of here. Why did you bring her here? Beth asks, well, who was that? What was that? And she goes, this is where Heather's facts comes in. She goes, oh, that was a mistake, a rounding error. And that rounding error is an important part, because why would you say rounding error, right? Yeah. Well, actually, what we missed out on and didn't mention, and maybe you know already, but apparently Alice, she was either a math teacher or a mathematician, because she actually wrote a book that I believe in episode 1 was like laid on the ground and had her name on it. And I completely missed that fact. And that's where we had a whole conversation about, we weren't sure about Beth's dad at all, but where maybe she got some of this analytical mathematician like smarts for the chess. Right. We talked about math quite a bit in the beginning and how good she was at it in the classroom. But that was some of the background there that I totally missed.
That's also, well, first of all, that's awesome. And thank you to Heather. And I actually screwed that up because I either misread something or misinterpreted something. I thought the father was like the mathematician. Or remember, I was saying that in the early thing that like I think she got math from like her dad or something. But actually, that makes total sense, and it also is more in line, I guess, with that dynamic between Beth's genius and her trauma, right? Which really is pretty much all directly related to her mother, right? And she inherited, her mother's incredible genius. And flashing forward to this episode, which we'll back up, but we already know like her and Jolene visit, this place where she grew up in this trailer, like on a river, despite mentioning in that scene that her mother came from money and married money, right? But so what happened, right? Well, clearly her genius kind of like drove her mad in some ways, right? And anyway, that is super interesting and good. Good heads up, because that whole scene in the car, like I'm glad I saw it for the last time last night. It's just so traumatizing, and it never gives you completion, like even in the end where like what's coming with the car wreck, like the last thing that is said, and I believe this is the last time we see Alice in the entire series of season 1, is she says, now I got to figure out what to do, and Beth is like, with what? And she's like, with you, right?
Yeah.
And it's just sad. Just like your heart goes out, and you just realize, just the pain that this character has been dealing with in the entire show. So
yeah, and it is a series of end games. This is pretty much the most literal name of the episode. For every opening, there is an end game. As we like to say here on Coffeehouse Blunders, it's the first time we've said it. But we see an end game.
Every opening there. First of all, eat your heart out, Marvel. You just crushed with every opening. There is an end game. That's better than anything Doctor Strange said. What did he say? He's like, we're in the end game now. Like, whatever.
Yeah,
that
not cool.
James Montemagno just crushed that.
That's what I do. I've been sitting on that for a few days. So we see the end game of Alice and her dad, who basically just leave, doesn't want to take her back. We see the end game of Alice and Beth. We see obviously the bigger end game of Borgov as we get to later on. But we get to our first end game, a second end game, I guess, would be of Mr. Shaibel, because Jolene is back, and she showed up at the end of episode 6, and she didn't come there just to party. She came there because Mr. Shaibel has passed, and she wanted to inform Beth of this. And through this experience, Beth is sort of a hot mess still at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And she has, for all intents, just really kind of given up on everything. And she doesn't even know if she's going to go to Moscow. She doesn't know if she's going to go play the Soviets. And Jolene kind of, brings her back. And through this tragedy of Mr. Shaibel passing, reconnects the two of them, and for the better.
I mean, totally. And to break down some of the specific moments that happened there, as you kind of, that's the summary. Jolene shows up and kind of saves the day. And I think it starts when, the episode ended with her at the door. Then they're both kind of going to bed. And it's almost like it's reminiscent of when they were together, right? In the, in the Catholic Christian, orphanage they grew up in. Right. And Beth is like, God, I got to stop the pills. I got to stop drinking. And Jolene's like, yeah, you think? Right? Kind of thing. Right. And then Jolene kind of like reveals that indeed she did steal the Modern Chess Openings book. Right.
Yeah.
And gives Beth back the book that she took because she was jealous that she got adopted. Right. And then the scene in the car like really left a mark for me, because like is that moment where Jolene's kind of sharing where she's at. She's a paralegal, right? She's at this law office, and she's trying to work her way up, and says, I'm trying to get what you have, kind of thing, to Beth, and all these things for her. And Beth is like looking at her, and she's like, you just don't know, like, or appreciate, like, basically, what you represent or what you have, and your talent and all that stuff. And I think that there's a lot of people that have said this to Beth over the entire like series, right? In different ways, whether it's like the admiration she's gotten from her male peers, like the Beltics and Benny, right? Or there's the, just people that, there's even, sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but the girl in episode 6 who kind of comes and says she's pre-med, the first girl she beat. Anyway, that young woman, right? But I think coming from Jolene, it's like a bit of a wake-up call, because it was like hey, we come from the same place, and you don't have like the self-pity card over me kind of thing. And sometimes that could just be super powerful, because like literally anybody in life can wallow and focus on what's, on their negative story, or they can make a choice and focus on basically what's in front of them and find some sort of empowerment from what they've been through. And when you talk to a peer who like kind of like you don't have it over in terms of like your self-pity story of the pain you've been through, I think sometimes that can be really impactful, because it's not with like a lack of empathy that Jolene kind of calls her out. She understands what she's been through, but it's kind of like, hey, but what are you going to do about it? Right. And I feel like the whole episode is just the tone that's set there is super powerful. And then we're on this journey where they go back to the house, and they're there to see, or there to attend Mr. Shaibel's funeral.
Yeah. I love the conversation, that night before, and the car ride. I think you're right. It's sort of opening up Beth's eyes to, hey, you don't know how good you have it. In fact, right? Like
right.
there's, not that Beth didn't have to work at chess, but she was very naturally gifted on this. And there's a very funny quote that Beth says to Jolene as Jolene is describing that she was in physical education, then she was like interested in history. Now she's doing poli-sci. She was going to go to law school and, teach people. And Beth goes, I didn't know that it could be a career choice. Like that could be a career choice.
To be an anarchist, or what does she say? She's going to be a radical.
Radical. Yeah. And she goes, I didn't think that could be a career choice. And that's literally what Mrs. Shaibel said to Beth about being a chess player.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Remember, like she didn't know. Like it was very similar phrase, basically. So in that situation, it was fascinating because there obviously is a lot of a Mrs. Wheatley. I mean, a Mrs. Wheatley in Beth, obviously. And I remember, like, when Beth went to go play her very first games, she's like, "Oh, I didn't know that could be, that could be a career choice. So that was something that you could do, right? And that there was money in this, and
right."
And then there's kind of this Beth kind of saying it there. And then the car ride happens. And I think that sort of opens her eyes up a little bit more, like, oh, like you can do this. And this is a thing. And this, is good. But yeah, you're right. Then they go back to the house. And I wrote down exactly what you said, which was, I am still fascinated. Like, what was, I want a Alice spinoff in some weird way.
And also it's as much as we, obviously in the chess world, to go back to business real quick, clearly the whole chess world has benefited from, the Queen's Gambit boost, right? Mm-hmm. And it's reignited interest of those who forgot they had it, and of course brought new people in. But we've the discussion naturally happens like, hey, I wonder if they're going to do a sequel, right? And people are like, no, the whole thing is based on the book. There's no sequel at whatever. And I think it was our chief of product said, I'll give you 13 reasons why there could be a sequel, right? And of course, 13 Reasons Why was literally, talk about a show that was supposed to be one season and from start to finish had a beginning and an end, right? It's literally based on, unfortunately, a suicide, right, of the main character, and they turned it into 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah,
and no one really cares about it. Forget like the interest of chess and why it might be really cool if this became a long running thing for the growth of chess. But regardless of that, there are some things they do that potentially plant the seed, like Alice's storyline, because they don't even bring conclusion, right? They say like, hey, she came from money, she married money. And then like Jolene's like, what happened? And I believe Beth is like, well, it's complicated, right? Yep. And that's kind of it. And so you're 100% right. I was like, man, like I want to know what happened there. How did we get here?
Yeah. There's a lot of missing elements in this story arc, even though we do learn so much more, and we get to some end games that sometimes we don't know how we get there. Hey. So that's life.
Oh man, I want endgames to be. I want to do a running bet with me and you, like Meow. Like, how many times can you naturally fit endgame into your daily life? And if you like whatever the bounty is, I will pay it. Okay, that is so good. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as we know, Mr. Shaibel has played his final move, and his endgame is here at the funeral, and. They're sitting there, and this is kind of a sad scene. It's sort of, I think I don't know if everyone, at least me, I've thought about this. Like, what if I die? Like, who's going to show up at my funeral, right? I mean, I'm going to be cremated, but it's like, who's going to be there? And no one's there from the home, and like they're sitting there, no one's crying. They're pointing it out, and they say, it looks like they're all, or Beth says, it looks like they're ready to go to the bank, and cash in on whatever Mr. Shaibel has. I don't know. That's a super sad scene. And after that, they go back to the home. So they kind of went to the home. They didn't want to go in. And then they went to the funeral. They go back to the home. And Beth's like, I want to go. It's go time. And this is, I mean, just to me, this is a super emotional scene. Yep. I played it back a few times. Beth walks down into the, we find out that a lot has happened in the house, right?
Yep.
Some of the people are gone.
The lady broke her hip, right?
Yep.
But she's still around, kind of old and ornery.
Yeah. Super. Yeah. Worse almost now. And then, she goes down into the basement where it all started. She sits at the table. She kind of takes it all in. And then she sees this beautiful, memory board or whatever, this, like all these paper clippings of Beth's journey.
Of her.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's a super, I mean, I got emotional right there, where like, you realize, like, obviously Mr. Shaibel was the closest thing she ever had to a father, right? Mm-hmm. And he, followed every bit of her life, right? And then she finds this picture of where he looks kind of like just just it's so funny how he looks like almost shocked, but that someone's taking a picture in the photo, which I loved. And then you've got Beth behind him with like her hand on his shoulder, and it was a very awkward relationship, but also like a super intimate one. And then it's like you finally get the release, like she finally like breaks down, right? Like, and kind of cries. And obviously she's mourning the loss of Mr. Shaibel, but it's like so much more than that, right? I mean, especially the way they set the tone with the fact that she didn't have a dad, and the way her mother and father handled her, and then for her to really just like finally like mourn a little bit instead of like suppressing, which is like literally what the character has done the entire series, right? Like now she's like breaking down and like acknowledging, that she's just sad, right? And then you got Jolene there, so comforting her.
Yeah, there's always real moves leading up to the end game, and that's what we see. We
I'm
get
sipping the coffee here, by the way. This is a great morning. You and I have not recorded many of the shows this season in the morning, which I know it's Coffeehouse Blunders. So I want to share real quick that I drank this coffee, blue bottle, out of my December coffee dripper begotten for me by my bestie here, James Montemagno. And so today I am drinking some good blue bottle from Ethiopia. Yeah, I forget exactly the farm, but I love the blue bottles come with the breakdown, the story of where this coffee came from. Anyway, totally digressing into old school Coffeehouse Blunders, but really enjoying this cup of Joe as we make our final moves and transition from the middle to the end game. I'm gonna let you do it. It's awkward when I do it.
It is. It just doesn't work. No, I'm just kidding. I will say that. Yeah, I also, the reason I was 15 minutes late is I needed to make some coffee. I needed to get into the mindset here, because we see a little crusade come to an end game, because the Christian Crusade no longer in Beth's life. We are back, and Beth's got to get to Moscow. Like that is sort of this.
Well, but there's a whole breakdown that happens with the Christian Crusade, right? We should probably. I mean, because I talked about how like the parallel again to Bobby Fischer was that he would turn away sponsors, and again I couldn't remember if there was like literally a direct reference to like a Christian Crusade, and obviously, communism being directly associated with atheism and Marxist, the whole thing, right? But there's that scene where like, because remember they paid her way to San Francisco,
yep,
and that was already too late, right? She did that and went, and now she's in a spot where they're like telling her the things she needs to say on their behalf, and she's like, I'm not going to say this crap, right? Yeah. And then she has to give them back the money, which is a huge thing, because that whole process is like she's having these conversations with Benny on the phone, and you're kind of proud of Beth for doing this, like doing what's right, but also like you can see that, Benny, who just wants nothing but her chess success, is also super frustrated with how they got here. And, just that whole dynamic, I think, is important, especially because of where we know the episode ends with ultimately, the band gets back together, right? But I think that the road they had to go through with like Beth crying and mourning, and then having integrity and giving this money back, but then like also, just because you do that in life doesn't mean everything's happy again. Like she still had to feel the consequences of her actions, and like she pretty much almost ruined her relationship with Benny, right? Not just like as like lovers, but also just as a friend, right? He was like, so I think that because that scene where like he hangs up on her, like where she's sitting on the staircase talking, it was like she needed to like find her own way again. And she ends up relying on Jolene, because you realize like, even though she's kind of back grounded and doing the right things now, she's made like a ton of mistakes because of her substance abuse,
There were definitely some blunders leading up to this point. And, I think that, I do love that the scene of the Christian Crusade, because you're right. She stood her moral high ground and said, I'm not going to do that. And it's going to cost her, right? Because they had already invested significant money. And she's like, whatever, I'll just pay you all back, right? And we know that Beth obviously has some money, but as we find out, it's not that much. Leading back,
bought the house. Yep.
Because she bought the house, she updated the house. She tells Benny that she's been, keeping the house updated. And, it's a great scene, because I do sort of feel like, hey, if you don't want to be a pawn in someone else's structure, is that a thing? Is that a good thing? I mean, right? I mean, you don't want to be on that e-file, and then all of a sudden, boom. I don't know what happens. Anyways, what I'm saying is, you don't want to be someone else's pawn, right? And that's sort of how this was going down. And, Beth's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I do love she calls Benny, and Benny's like, I don't got the money. She's like, what do you mean you got the money? He's like, I don't got the money, right? Whether he has the money or not, we don't know.
Right.
She does call him out for maybe gambling it all away. So,
Right.
that's not a good look. And he's like, call the State Department or the Chess Federation, whatever. He's pissed. He hangs up on her.
Yeah.
And done. Right. And that was awesome. And I mean, luckily, that wasn't the end of that relationship. But it was close. I mean, I guess, there's only so many straws before you break, right? And Benny was pissed multiple times, right? I think that, when she left New York, he thought that she was going to come back. He thought that they had something.
Yep.
And they didn't. So there's, I mean, that happens. So, I mean, I like that she did this and it made this move. I don't necessarily like that she, pissed off Benny so much, but luckily Benny's Benny, and he just really he's here for the chess. Let's just be honest.
He's here. I mean, he's here for the chess. I watched the episode 6, the sex scene, right? And where he immediately starts talking about chess again. My wife thought that was funny. And like but anyway, so yeah, we already know where Benny's head is at. Benny's head is in the chess. And but all right, so where are we at? Where are we at? So she's kind of on her own. She's, we're going through a ton of stuff. We're reliving the past, but this time in a healthy way, not just sort of like traumatic flashbacks. She's kind of confronting, her loss, her pain, also the damage she's created in these relationships. And the one person who's really still there and kind of has her back is the OG,
Miss Jolene. Yeah, because she can't get
Jolene.
She's not getting anything from the Chess Federation. She's not getting anything from the State Department. And Jolene steps up. They're playing squash. I think it's squash, right?
Little squash. Yeah.
Squash. I never played squash. Have you played squash?
I've never played squash.
I don't know. It looks like fun. I don't know.
Yeah, it did look like fun. I got to be honest. I was like, I played tether. Wait, tetherball's not quite the same. You can play tetherball outside, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of squash courts. You know what always scared me about squash is that they're hitting the ball so hard. And these guys are wearing goggles, like for their eyes. Like you walk by the gym, I'm going to play basketball at the YMCA. Yeah. I see some dudes playing squash. And I'm like, that just looks like it would hurt if the ball hits you.
Yeah.
And you're putting yourself in a really dangerous enclosed cage. So yeah, that's why I never played squash.
I agree. I play golf because I hit the golf ball very far away from everybody. Yeah. But like that thing comes back at you.
Right.
It's like it's like worse than table tennis, because table tennis, like you can kind of see and prepare a little bit. And it's this little tiny little ball, but I don't know what that squash ball is, but it looks scary.
Yeah.
So, not about
we
it.
Played we recently played I forget the game you can kind of play on the beach where you have two rackets in a smash ball. It's kind of, and you just hit it up to each other back and forth. You see how many you can get. You see people doing that. It's like a wooden racket and like a little rubber ball. And we did that recently back in September. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's a ball with rackets that I have never partaken.
Yeah, I feel like when you have that racket, you're just like, get out of here.
Let's see how long we can talk about this without talking about anything real.
Well, let's end this game of all the shenanigans and let's get on a plane, Danny. We're on a plane again, and we're heading to the Soviet Union, to Moscow. And you've been there. It's a thing. You've been there, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah, Moscow's a real place, not a made-up place, right? For all you flat earthers out there, it's a real thing.
Real place.
And so she's flying to Moscow, and she's in a good place, right? She's studying chess, and she's
serious.
She's serious. She's ready to rock. And here we go. We're back in the motherland. That's how I like to call it.
The State Department gives her a handler, I will say.
Yes.
And I do love the exchange with this guy.
On the plane. Yeah.
She has no idea what department this guy's from at all. And he's telling her that, you might see, first he offers her signals from Borgov. She's like, well, what would that look like? It's like, I don't know. And it's like, why? And, is there like Russian interference or something like this?
Yeah.
Like, what is Borgov going to do? Borgov is never spoken to her really. Right. And, nor does he really speak to her at all, even in this one. But,
No, it is a funny scene because it does represent some of the. I think it was kind of silly. Like first he gets the drink, offers her a drink, she says no, and then like says no drinking, and she's like, "Well, you just offered me a drink." He's like, "That was a test,"
Yep.
and then starts saying all the things that they might do. But there's sort of like a level of paranoia where Beth is like, "This is insane. Like I don't even know what to tell you." And
I came for chess. I came for chess.
I came for the chess.
I don't know if you know, we're all chess players, and we're going to be playing chess.
Yeah.
And but yeah, we're there. We're in Moscow. It's lovely. I've never been to Russia. I have a few friends, including you, that have been to Russia.
Well, they show the Kremlin. They show the Spassky building, right, which is just absolutely. The Kremlin is amazing, as well as the Spassky building. And there's something magical about the. I don't know. I mean, originally I would think of like movies like Anastasia, like as a kid, like the Russian princess, and whatever. But like the architecture and just it's that's kind of the symbol of, hey, we're in Moscow, baby.
Yeah, gives me that Tetris vibe.
Yeah, so. Tetris vibe, love it. The brick.
Yep, Alexei Potnivov is the creator of Tetris from Russia. There's a whole backstory that I'll link to a very great video of the entire back history of Tetris and how.
Okay, I gotta check this out.
Yeah, it's super good. How Alexei, who actually worked at Microsoft for a little bit of time, maybe he still does. Where does Alexei work? Maybe he still works at Microsoft. Could be, maybe not. Oh. But anyways, yeah, he worked in like this studio and he developed Tetris literally on the government R&D center. And that's where it was created. It's a whole thing. He was working there. They basically tried to take it from him, but like he was able to get. I don't think he got a lot of money from Tetris itself because of the time in the era. Like basically, Russia kind of owned it. It's this whole backstory. I'll give the whole thing. It's great.
Okay. Can't wait.
It's good. It's a good like history lesson because it's of the era, kind of in a way. I mean, granted that happened in kind of like the 80s or whatnot, but still kind of similar-esque, not a lot has changed between those two times. Anyways, we're there and I love Beth goes into her room. I love like the handlers, like this room's a lot like so much nicer than mine. Yeah, but she sits there and she's like, yes, this will do nicely.
Yeah, this is a great room. And the handler is such a funny scene, right? Because
he knows nothing about chess and he just,
Well, the Borgov thing earlier in the earlier episodes where he has his handlers from the KGB, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting, and the dynamic of the battle between like the West and the the Soviet Union was just so real. I mean that whole thing was a real deal, right? And I don't know a lot of stories of Bobby Fischer's handlers. I know that all that stuff kind of like existed, but I don't know enough about it to suggest that how similar that is, but I think it was just funny. And like, I love that he resents how much nicer her room is. So,
yeah. And chess starts. I wrote down I wanted to ask you about this quote from Thomas Huxley, which is the chessboard is the world. The pieces are the phenomena of the universe. Mm-hmm. The roles of the game are what we call the laws of nature. And the player on the other side is hidden from us.
So, I don't know what to say about that quote besides sounds great, right? Like it sounds great. Like I think I think chess as like what we'll call it, like the lore of chess, or like the symbol of like strategic thinking that the game is, like outside of. There's like the professional world of chess players where a lot of them just think like Beth, like to remind us in episode 6, where they ask her if she does puzzles and she's like, I always considered them a waste of time. They would never happen in a real game, right? She's what I would classify as a gamer. Like for whatever reason, she figured out she had talent for something. And it was because she was good that she got even better. She wants to win. She wants to crush for whatever sense of self-fulfillment she gets by destroying another man's ego, right? That's who she is. And then there are people that are like, kind of like the scientists who are, I would say, more like the technical Borgovs, who appreciate like the mathematical simplicity of like, just like how technical the game can be, and that it's a game of like black and white, complete information. And then I would say there's like the artist of chess. And that's kind of like quotes like that remind me of like people who just love like the beauty of the game. They look at it like it's art, right? And I've never been in that like third class, because like I look at art and I think it's either really bright and pretty, or that I'm not a big guy who just like looks at like an artist and a painting and like dives in for hours on like the symbolism of how the colors interact and how that's the representation of like universal stuff. And as someone who's quite the existentialist, right, and contemplates the meaning of life and his purpose on a regular basis, like I don't know why I'm here. I mean, I am that person, but when it comes to chess and like the art part of it, like I just never have been that person, right? I look at it the same way I look at art. Like that's a pretty picture, or it's not. I'm not into it. Let's move on. So I'm just being, this is just me, right? I'm just not the artist chess player. And that sort of quote is like the beauty and the symbolism of the game. And, I had a friend when we were younger who literally talked about chess like as like a representation of like the balance of the universe, like Taoism. Like it was like everything about chess is the yin and the yang and the balance. And like you can sacrifice pieces for the initiative. And there's always a perfect balance of struggle for power between black and white on the board. And I literally blacked out like 10 minutes into, 10 minutes ago. Right. I'm I get it. I don't know what to say. I'm like playing to win the game. I get you. So I'm a little more like on the Beth circle, like that line of thinking as far as like why I got good at chess more than I am on, I just appreciated the beauty of the game kind of thing.
Yeah. And I couldn't even really find why this, because if I looked up Thomas Huxley, he was like an English biologist, and there's really nothing in his Wikipedia page about chess at all, or it wasn't like a chess player. Anyways, it was very odd, but it's a beautiful quote. I agree, it's a beautiful quote. I don't know anything what rationale behind it, but it's definitely there. What I wanted to ask you though is they open this
definitely there.
It's definitely there. It's definitely a thing. And I was going to ask you, this is unlike any other chess setup that we've ever seen. It's almost like a runway in the middle. And you have been to Moscow, you have played chess in Russia, and I
not
assume
in tournaments like that. I can tell you that it's a beautiful setup for sure.
Is it realistic? Is this like?
I mean, it is. It is. I would say again, and I think I said this in earlier episodes. One of the only things I found unrealistic about some of these elite events they created for the show was how close the fans are. Right? Like sitting right up on top of them, in some ways. But as far as like the stage, right? And like kind of the dark, like the dark lighting for where people sit, right? And then like sort of the overexposed lighting over where the chess players are playing, right? You're with me on that, right? How they outline that. That's kind of realistic. I mean, we're about to see Tata Steel kick off here, actually tomorrow. On chess.com, which is, like I always say, it's kind of like the Wimbledon of chess, been around forever, a super tournament. They are playing it in person. I'm going to be very interested to see what the restrictions are for COVID and how this all goes. But that's like a very well lit room in like more of like feels like just a wooden floor ballroom. That's a very common setting. But that setting is also, very realistic. The dark lit sort of amphitheater, and then the people on stage, the chess players, were kind of putting on a show. Like they're almost like a Broadway play kind of feel, right? So that is like a setting that you've seen a lot of world championship matches on. And, everything else in the room is dark besides the light over the chessboard of these elites. So that would be realistic, other than the fact that like the people watching are like right on top of them, right? Like they're like arm's length away. Other than that, I mean, that's, it's an epic setting. Not a super common setting, but it is a realistic one. It is something that, you've seen for sure.
Got it. Yeah, they had all the boards like in a row. It's kind of the first time we've seen this sort of setup here, and they're calling out, this is a big match. Can you talk maybe about the significance of this match? Because we've seen a lot of matches and sort of how they've increased, but this is sort of the coup d'etat. Like this is the big one.
Right. Well, again, they've been setting this up like from the beginning as far as like going to Moscow. If you win this, you go to Moscow kind of thing, right? Like the U.S. championship. And they've been setting this up as like, so the climax of all of her chess experiences, right? This is the big one, like you said. What word did you just use? It was a fancier word than I know.
The coup d'etat. I think that's a real word. I think it's a real thing. Coup d'etat.
That's a fancy word. Kind of like Jolene says she used a lot of fancy words.
That's true.
When she had her interview at the law firm, that was a fancy word. Anyway, so it's the coup d'etat, and her magnum opus. Can I say that?
Yeah, I think that's a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Sounding smart. No, so but I would say that's just all been part of like the fictional storyline of the Queen's Gambit. There had to be a journey and sort of a way that she was going to ultimately either like make it as a person and a chess player or not. And I think that again, Moscow is like a chess capital of the world. It's a city that has held like many world championship matches. It's a city that has held historically one of the strongest open and regular tournaments. It's an open semi kind of club, the Aeroflot Open, which existed before that, before it was named after the Russian airline, I forget. But and that's actually usually held in, God, what's the hotel? The hotel that's actually very close to the Kremlin in this Spassky building. So like all that stuff like plays well with chess and chess lovers, chess historians, chess players, because there's no way you would question that an epic finale, a coup d'etat, would take place in Moscow with Beth being the American there to fight against the Soviet Union and this rival Borgov, right? But if I'm so kind of the question you were asking is whether that's like you're asking whether that's like a realistic thing for this to be like the big event or okay, yeah. So it is, right? But again, there's no like what I said in the beginning when there was the qualification that happened for Moscow. There's no Grand Prix that ties a U.S. championship to like events in Moscow and Paris. Right. Like that's never existed. So I was clarifying that's that part of it. But there are similar things to that. Right. There have been, events that if you're the top American, you would maybe get to play in the candidates and represent America there. And so all of that stuff is loosely accurate enough that it makes sense.
Got it. Yeah. And the opening here is pretty dramatic as they call in everybody. And her first match against Lev and this one's fascinating because as he sits down, they actually they blend in some of the real world here as they make a mention to Nona
Gaprindaishvili.
Thank you.
And so she actually was, she's one of the greatest women chess players of all time.
Yep.
And so go ahead, I'll let you say, yeah. So that was a good reference. And like we said, they've done such a good job of like mixing in fact and fiction, which blurs the lines between wait, was that real or not? Right. And that's what a lot of people have asked about the show in a good way. And the chess players have super appreciated like, hey, this is like, they're doing such a good job of making us feel like, yeah, they did their homework. They know. And Nona Gaprindaishvili is a legend in the chess world.
Yeah, she's the first woman to be awarded the FIDE title Grandmaster, which we talked about before. She was the women's world champion from 62 to 78. She played in the Olympics, the Women's Olympiads in the 1980s, and in Dubai in 86. She won all 10 games she played.
You got her wiki up right now.
I do. She's five-time winner of the Women's Soviet Championship in 64, 73, 81, 83, 85. She continues to dominate to this day, I would say. And, it was fascinating because I think that when I look at it, it's a very small segment where they pan the camera to her. But if you're not a chess person or didn't, pause to write down the name and Google it,
right,
you would have no idea.
Yep.
But nailed it.
Yep. Nope. Nailed it. Like you said, hashtag nailed it. And it's an appropriate way to move toward our, sorry, I did it again. It's not my job. Go ahead.
Well, Beth here, let's just get to the first game because the games go quick. The first one here versus Lev is 27 move victory. That's fast game, Danny.
It's super fast. Yeah, no. And that's what Beth's known for, right? Is when she's successful, she's historically anyway, crushing people. And yeah, it sets the tone that she's found herself again, right? We've seen this dog and pony dance before. We've seen her show up and be a baller, and then at some point in the event get pulled back into her, her demons went out, right? So, but yeah, this is definitely a sign that like, okay, Beth is back. She crushes this guy, and we love it.
Yep. And then we get our first. This is the most realistic favorite scene of the entire movie, which is the chess player dinner. Danny, I wanted to ask you about this because in the I used to, back in my glory day, when I used to go and speak to people about development and stuff, there would be
back when people traveled.
There would be like speaker dinners, and you get invited to a conference. It's kind of like playing chess. You get invited to a conference, you give a session, and like, hey, we're going to get all the speakers together and have a speaker dinner. And I'm not a fan. You would think that like, oh, I love to speak to people. I love speaker dinners. Like I'm not a speaker dinner person. I'm basically Beth Harmon in this because I feel awkward. I'm like around people that I don't know very well. Sometimes there's a coworker or two there, but like I'm just gonna go to like In-N-Out or like to Whole Foods and get a salad, right? Like that's what I'm gonna sit by myself over here. Like that's kind of what I want to do. It's like, it's almost too fancy for me. Like I'm not, not that I'm like, I don't want to be rude, but it's just not my shtick. I don't enjoy doing that. And that's sort of what we see here where Beth surrounded by all these players chit chatting, and she's kind of just sit there by herself.
And it makes you feel more alone than you would if you were just actually alone in your hotel room eating your own dinner, right? Because it like highlights the social anxiety and stuff. Dude, I'm 100% with you again as someone who people would think like, I literally, talk for a living and am on camera a lot and all that stuff. I'll say, it's so funny this is coming up because two things to say. One, I want to say these dinners, like that's a very common thing. In fact, one of my first fancy schmancy speaker dinners where I was, one of the players invited, to an event like this was actually in Russia when I was 15 playing in this event where I got my first International Master Norm. And it was actually the first time I had alcohol, fun fact. And it was because glasses were filled in front of me of like wine or vodka. I didn't even ask. Just everyone had it. Like you sat down and I tasted a little bit of wine. I'm not going to lie. I did. Okay. There you go. I was
judgment.
15. There you go. No judgments. Right. And it was a cool experience. The talks that were given were in Russian. So at the time I was learning Russian and doing a pretty good job, but I didn't, necessarily pick up everything. The guy that was with me, my handler, so to speak, Beth had a handler. I had a handler too. Alan, shout out to you, Big Al. Won't say his last name, but Alan was the guy who, when I traveled, was with me, who was fluent in Russian and actually worked in the CIA, fun fact, before the wall fell. So he's got stories, man. He's got real KGB stories. It was a lot of fun to be with him, and he came with me to Russia. What he got was, if he paid his own way, he would get to sit in with me on all my lessons with Dvoretsky and Dolmatov and Zaitsev and these guys. So that's what Alan got out of it. And what I got was my parents felt better because I was with a guy in his mid-30s who was fluent in Russian while I was 15, right? So anyway, long story short, those dinners really do exist. Fun fact, that was when Danny had his first sip of alcohol. And then to the, the social anxiety part, dude, I totally relate to that. In fact, I was interviewing a guy yesterday for a job, who we may hire as someone to be kind of work in our community management stuff. And he said he met me in Norway, which was the last time I was at maybe one of these dinners, which was in 2019. We were in Oslo for the Fisher Random World Chess Championship, and Magnus was there and Hikaru was there. And little did I know that would be like the last event I was traveling to, right? Because we came home, had the holidays in 2019, and then COVID hit, right? Yep. And he said he met me, and I felt bad, but I told him, I said, one thing that I really struggle with is being in a room where I know people know me and I don't know them. Like it literally makes my skin crawl. And it's a weird thing. And that's not like an ego thing. Cause I'm like, obviously in the chess world, it's like, we're not major celebrities or anything, but when you're in a chess setting, right. And clearly people recognize you because you're on freaking camera all the time and a talking head, right. It literally gives me social anxiety. And I don't share that often and but it's really a thing that I have. And sometimes it makes me seem a little more awkward, or I go out of my way to like call my wife so I can be on the phone in a corner, because it really bothers me if I feel like I'm standing in a room and someone's looking at me and I know they're about to introduce themselves. It makes me nervous. It's a weird thing. I get social anxiety.
Yeah, it's the same. I've gone to some user groups back in the day, and ones that I host where I'm the host and I'm doing things, it's very different. And then I would get into this room and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable here. And for no reason. I don't know, something takes over me. But we see that in Beth a little bit.
So we both connected with Beth there.
We did. It was a great moment. I mean, when you can be like, wow, I have like just this one thing in common with one of the greatest chess players of all time, then boom. So she continues to crush over here. My favorite was the end of the third game, which I don't actually know who she played. I think we saw the scene for a little bit, but this is the first time that Borgov gets up and looks at her endgame. He studies her board. Big move, and she turns around. She's walking away because they leave the chess area at the end of after they win or lose, gracefully or not, as we will see. and Borgov gets up because he's like, I can't, I don't know if it was a quick game or what it was, but this is kind of very not typical of him.
Well, and it also is a sign that he kind of is paying attention, I guess. And we already knew he's been paying attention, but this is like the fact that they go out of their way to have the scene of like Beth noticing that he's noticing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it kind of creates that we already know where we're headed here. We're headed for the epic Borgov Beth showdown, right? Harmon versus Borgov. And it'll be, again, we've had in Mexico City, we've had Paris, right? And this is going to be the third rematch. But I think that's kind of what they're just setting the tone. And also, I'm kind of saving my point about the Borgov Beth relationship. And I read what some people thought the interpretation was on the internet, even after watching it again last night. And I think there's more to that, and maybe more potentially for a sequel than just like him acknowledging a rival, as far as like how she's kind of won him over a little bit, And I think this is just another scene that's interesting, and it's just building up toward our showdown.
Yep. And every time that Beth leaves the building, the crowds continue to grow and swarm her. Started with just a few people. She kind of is becoming this idol in Russia, which is cool.
Yeah, I love that. That.
So cool. It just kind of completely swamps her, and she's like, taken by it. And it's really cool. And we kind of see that trend continue to go. We see a few more matches really quick. Hellstrom, who marches off and just gets super pissed off. And then we see Shapkin, who is a graceful exit, out. You see this difference in players as they get beat by Beth, back and forth. And we land on this beautiful scene right before my favorite match. Match number 6 is my favorite, but we see this beautiful breakfast scene in Russia, which I'm assuming is reminiscent to all of your breakfasts in Russia,
Always.
where an 11-year-old asks you if you would like a big, beautiful glass of vodka in the morning.
100%. Yeah, no, it is. That doesn't actually happen, but yes. Anyway, so it's what is it about it? I feel like there's something, and even as you're describing it, and I'm remembering watching it last night, like it's kind of a celebration of where Beth has been, and I think that she's in a place where chess players are appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's one of the things that we know, like there's the scene in the US Championship team where Benny is like literally resentful over the fact that they're superstars, and they're, and like that whole scene where he just like tears down the room. Right.
Yeah.
Where they're playing the US Championship in Ohio. And that part of it is real. And whether, the breakfasts were that, extravagant, and whether, people were waiting paparazzi to cheer and take pictures, like, I'm going to guess that's a little overdone. I wasn't there in the 60s and 70s, but I will say that the general, story is like, again, because chess was a Soviet supported state sponsored sport, and the things we've talked about many times in the series, like chess players were deeply appreciated throughout Eastern Europe, and Russia. And so I think that's kind of the way she feels about that, right? And we already know in episode 6 where she kind of told Cleo like she could live anywhere, right? And could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a part of Beth, and without spoiling the total ending yet, we're going to get to where like she likes where she's at. She likes Russia. She likes being appreciated, and they definitely set the tone of how she's appreciated there for who she is.
That's true. It's a good way of looking at it. Where I think we take a lot of sports ball for granted, where a lot of sports players or celebrities, and in the chess world it wasn't that way. Where you're right, in Russia it is, and these people are a big deal, and anyone that's even there is a big deal. And we sort of see that in the celebrity status of some of these other players as they were introduced in the very beginning. The round of applause, just like the amount of people that are there, the amount of people that are gathering, especially for the end match there. But before we get to the Borgov match, we get a Lutsenko match, and I love Lutsenko. What great hair! What great swag, just everything about him. And there's all these flashbacks where he's like sleeping while they're all watching a movie or whatever, just this guy. I love everything about him. I just love him.
Well, and remember, isn't it the same actor that plays Mr. Shaibel? Or am I misremembering that?
No,
Hold
that's
on.
Not correct. That's not correct.
That
can't
episode,
be correct.
I'm trying to remember the name. No, but the person she plays with the big hair and is supposed to represent one. I think the person's supposed to represent like someone who she's like modeled herself after from a chess player style, but I'm pretty sure it's the same actor. Hold on,
Really?
so
IMDb Queen's Gambit. Here we go. We're doing real time thing. But yeah, he is, while Danny's looking this up, he is the oldest player there. So he is the most, seasoned player there. He's a world champion there. And yeah, we're going to look up the IMDb just so we can be really 100% sure. I can't be right. I don't believe you. Mr. Shaibel. No, Bill. No, it's just Mr. Shaibel. Luchenko. Right, Luchenko is Marcus Lodges, who plays Luchenko, and Mr. Shaibel is Bill Camp. So you're wrong, sir. You are wrong.
I'm wrong. I got that information from someone.
Maybe there's some
person will get yelled at. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know why I thought that. I thought that Luchenko was it is a great scene, right? And it's like he, she kind of says like, "Hey, I followed all your games," right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and he acknowledges that he has seen her games, right? So I feel like someone told me that was supposed to be like a doctor, like a Mr. Shaibel thing, and that person was wrong.
Well, I will say that that person, Marcus Lodges, also was a producer on all 7 episodes. So there's that.
Okay. So maybe that was a cool thing too, that he, yeah, you're right. That was wrong. And another wrong piece of information by Dan. Hold on. She also mentioned Luchenko's game since she was young, maybe with, Mr. Shaibel.
Maybe Mr. Shaibel taught her about her. It's hard to say.
Okay, well, there you go. Anyway, so yeah, Luchenko, obviously the guy is someone who she says she studies at games, and so to beat him is like a huge coming of age kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, they're
regardless
really
of my theory. I told myself in my head that it was supposed to be also a shout out to Mr. Shaibel. I was wrong, and we move on.
Yeah, and because they really talk him up, right? Then now he's a world champion, but he defeated Alkine. Yeah, thank you. Alkine, when he was a boy, he had a draw with I'm going to butcher all these names. Botvinnik, and then crushed Braunstein.
David Braunstein, one of the best chess authors ever. So Braunstein and Botvinnik were rivals of their era. Botvinnik was the Soviet king and ultimately the father of the Soviet chess school. Literally, I mean, like people like Kasparov was trained in the Botvinnik school of chess. So it was named after him. So he's often referred to as kind of the father of the Soviet chess regime dominance, right? He was also, just fun fact, he was also like very outspoken politically and a communist. And so he was literally the perfect figurehead for what the Soviet Union needed. He was a full-blown Marxist, like huge Stalin, Lenin, Trotsky, like he was a huge supporter of the communist movement and the Soviet regime. And so for him to also be world champion was like literally he's considered the father of Soviet chess. And the reason the schools were named after him. And he was the kind of guy they wanted Fischer to be for the West, right? They wanted Fischer to win in the West and then be this representative of, the Western Judeo-Christian like dominance, capitalism for the win, right? And Fischer refused to do it. It's funny, as I'm going down these search holes, that was a weird thing to say, the search holes on Google, you see theories like that. Like, was Beth Harmon a Russian spy? Which is the kind of theories people had about Fischer, that he was a communist. And not that it matters, right? But anyway, it's all just super interesting. And the way we know this series ends, that we'll get into, is really interesting. How at home Beth feels, her final like fancy outfit that she has in the final moments, being in the Russian park with the babushka, and it's all so good. I love it. I really hope there's a sequel.
Yeah, there's this entire episode is super fun because you get this great Luchenko match. They go to adjournment, which is the first of 2 adjournments that we have. There's a fascinating part where we get a callback kind of to the camaraderie and the teammates, for all intents and purposes, that the Soviets have, because she sees all of them collaborating in a room together. Now, why they had the doors open is beyond me.
Right.
That's definitely, we're all going to be studying this chessboard, and of course, Beth's room's right down the aisle.
Right.
Just saying, kind of weird, but
and she's sees them all working together, right? A little not envious at the time, but at least she sees what Benny was saying is to be true, right? They're better because they work as a team.
They work as a team. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do anything during your adjournment. Like, I guess, like, it doesn't. I mean, that's what's kind of weird. We talked about adjournments that kind of happen a little bit less now, but like, it's so weird to me that all of a sudden, oh, we got this adjournment. Now we're literally going to the end game that you would get to if there wasn't an adjournment is probably dramatically different than if there was no adjournment.
Well, 100%. And we're going to get into that when we talk about the Ivanchuk short game, right? Which was the final game versus Borgov. But do we want to talk about the Luchenko game now? Or I mean, I'll say this. Yes, 100%. And in general, chess has changed a lot since in the modern era without adjournments since the introduction of sudden death, right? Now, I would, as someone who's actually been called an evil chess popularist, that's something I almost replaced my Twitter info with, by the way. That's going to be my info. Like, who is Daniel Rensch? He's an evil chess popularist. And because chess.com obviously has been, sort of the industry leader. I mean, I'll just say it since, a lot of the things we've pushed to the forefront from, with streaming and commentary over faster time controls historically, to do commentary on Blitz is insane, right? Just ask Nezhmadinov. Like, you can't do commentary over Blitz, right? That's what a fool's errand. But chess has evolved a ton. Faster time controls are entertaining, and they're also more fulfilling, frankly, for observer and player because, like, you can tune into the Speed Chess Championship and see a lot of start and finishes, right? And then you get to see some checkmates and some fun stuff, even if you can't watch the full 3-4 hour show, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than watching one game for 6 hours and how difficult that can be to the more casually interested chess enthusiast, right? Yep. So yes, we have pushed faster time controls and the entertaining educational aspects of kind of the, the patterns and the way that people can relate to chess rather than just like, some deep variations where I'm calculating 30 moves, even if I can do it. But the fans, there's only so much people can just appreciate that someone is an intellectual giant before they just sort of zone out, right? And I think that that's not really what people want to see. Okay, so without digressing into all that, I'm coming back to say, like, all that said, and all of my defense of myself of being an evil chess popularist to help the game grow, the truth is longer time controls and adjournments were higher quality chess in some ways, right? Because you had more time. Frankly, you had unlimited time in some ways. And there's no debate that the reason the last World Championship match in 2018 was all 12 draws in the classical portion, despite a few opportunities that both Caruana and Carlsen had. The reason it was all 12 draws is because with really long time controls, chess players don't make many mistakes, man. Right? And people kind of like seeing drama and mistakes, but if you're talking like the pure chess, like chess purists, right? If you want like the quality of it, it's twofold. Chess has gotten better and more accurate since the introduction of computers because we now can prepare more deeply and understand, chess at a higher level, frankly, due to like the ruthlessness of how chess computers can expose a bad move. But also just from a human perspective, without long time controls and adjournments, there's no way that chess humans aren't making more mistakes, right? Yeah. And so you do play a higher quality chess with adjournment and time to analyze it, especially if you have a team of seconds behind you. So that's my quick rant on that. Like 100% you're right that you make different decisions if you have, a whole night and hours and a team to think about a position than you do if you're under the clock and you've only got 20 minutes, right? 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's the game has changed, if you will, over time.
The game has changed. We're in the end game now.
We are. Well, hopefully not the end game of chess. So come on, Danny, get yourself together.
Yeah, sorry.
Anyways, we are in the end game of Luchenko, and do you want to break down this game at all? Because it was a recovery from Beth here, and he even says at the end it's a brilliant recovery.
Well, we've got the position where Black plays Rook D4 on the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So she plays Rook to D4. Are we following together?
We're following together. I'm here. I'm here with you.
And so already at this point, like Black is winning. And the reason is that after Rook to D4 attacking the queen, the reason that Luchenko has to play Queen E3 is because if the queen moves to any other square, let's say to guard D1, knowing that Black's next move is Rook D1, let's say she goes to Queen C2. Go ahead and play that. Like Queen C2 guard D1, then the F3 pawn hangs with Queen takes F3. So the queen is overworked. That's actually a tactic we have in chess where a piece is overloaded. Here, the queen is having to guard both f3 and the d1 square after the move rook d4. And at a high level like chess game, like white could resign right now after rook d4. Because again, the queen is being skewered to the d1 square. But if she chooses to guard d1, then queen takes f3. So in the game, the move queen e3 is played. Rook to d1 check comes. The only move is rook to e1 to block the check. Are we following?
I'm following. I'm here with you, buddy. I'm here.
Right. And if the reasons for that is king to g2 allows rook h2 checkmate. The bishop on e5 guards h2. And if king f2, we have the move bishop to d4. Well, actually, there's a million wins here. Rook h2 is also winning. Bishop d4 is just a pin of the queen to the king, so that would win a massive amount of material. So in the game, rook to e1 is played. And after the move rook to e1 is played, bishop d4 comes in. And now Luchenko, I keep wanting to call him fake Mr. Shaibel. God, I've really screwed myself up by convincing myself it was Mr. Shaibel. Anyway, he resigns because the queen is skewered to the rook on g1. If you move the queen, I can even take e1 and then take g1, right? So black is just winning a massive amount of material, and the game is over.
Boom. And he says he resigns with relief, and that Beth is one of the best chess players that he's ever played in his life.
I just love it.
Yeah, I love that dude. I just want more of that dude. Like, can I get a
Luchenko
spinoff?
Can we get a Luchenko spinoff?
That'd be great. I love his
What
hair.
has he been through?
God knows.
Man. If that hair could talk, right?
That's a great name for a podcast. If that hair could talk. Yeah, it's crazy.
That is a great. It would be great if it was an impromptu podcast where you and I are not allowed to see the hairdo before it's presented to us. We get a third party, and the hair shows up like it's a mullet, and you and I have to tell a story if that hair could talk, like what he's been through, what she's been through.
That'd be amazing.
That's a great podcast. All right, go ahead.
It's coming soon to a podcast player near you. Yeah, we see the end of that game. We see another match actually versus Flento, which is a 4-hour match. So this is sort of the night before
Borgov.
Before Borgov.
And all through the house.
Pills are being flushed. And something. And then we're at Borgov v. Harmon.
And this is it. This is the big one. The big daddy.
Why is Beth white starting this off? Because she'd kind of been black the entire time, but now in this instance, she's white starting off the match.
And it's funny because they don't
really say. I mean, I would assume then that Borgov had a draw.
But wasn't Beth white against him in episodes? She was white in Paris as well. Remember, she was black in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Then she loses with white in that Sicilian in Paris. And then she gets white again. So I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense that she would have white. Obviously, the colors kind of rotate in a tournament, right? So you asked the question, I realized I wasn't prepared to answer. I didn't put a lot of credence into that. I think it's totally normal that she would get white. I guess just the way they did it, especially given that literally like previous games, like she was black against Luchenko, but was she white against? Maybe. That's interesting. Maybe you're right. Maybe it should have. Either way, I'll also say this. In closed tournaments, it's not exactly the same as like color rotation because the pairings are kind of all set in advance. Like you already kind of know. Like you know your pairings 1 through 9 or 1 through 6, right? You know what color you're going to get and whatever. So it is normal sometimes that you could get 2 blacks and then 2 whites in a row or vice versa.
Gotcha.
So this is the big one because really we should just start with the adjourn position, right?
Well, I kind of want to talk about the call for adjournment, right? Which is the start of that adjournment, which is the entire audience gasps back in shock, to be honest with you, that Borgov calls for adjournment. Right.
Which is, again, so there's a lot to this, right? There's usually the person who calls for adjournment, like, it either believes it's a critical moment for sure, but also potentially believes that they're worse. Okay.
Mm.
And so the reason the crowd gasps is because it's sort of an admission by Borgov that he needs to look at this beast, right? He wants help from his team. So the reason I think they overdo that drama a little bit, but the reason why it was played out the way it was is because typically the person who asked for adjournment kind of is like, I need to go look at this with my team. I'm nervous that I'm about to make a big blunder. I'm nervous that I'm on the edge of my seat and I need to double check things, kind of thing. So that's an admission by itself by Borgov that oh bleep, the game has changed here with Beth Harmon, right? Kind of thing.
Got it.
So does that make sense? Yeah. But also, like, it's interesting because this game, as you pointed out, again, the chess expert on the show is Vasily Ivanchuk versus Patrick Wolf from the Beal Interzonal in 1993. And what's interesting is that game, that event did not have adjournment.
Mm.
And so this is just a massive shout out to whoever consulted on this chess. I mean, I know Gary Kasparov was there. I mean, not that he needs a shout out, but this is like what we're about to break down here with the chess, everybody, is just awesome in regards to why the Queen's Gambit, again, just like shook the chess world and is by far the gold standard going forward. Because the position that they adjourn with, Motzi, is from Ivanchuk Wolf. But in that game, as you pointed out, on move 36, Ivanchuk played the move G4, which is a mistake. And it was a bad move by Ivanchuk, and the game is eventually drawn because of it. Like, basically, White blows the advantage with this move. And didn't have the luxury of adjournment, but it's still super critical. Not just that the G4 was played, but this is one of the first times I think in the show where they don't just pay homage to a famous game. They actually improve upon the over-the-board chess that was played, right?
Yeah.
And so the move that Beth plays after, and I want you to break down the whole, like, all the scenes of, like, you know, the team of seconds being behind her. But the move that Beth plays is an improvement over Ivanchuk's G4. And the computer, I've been letting the engine run the whole time just to prove that that's how well they did the chess, that it's not just an improvement, like, subjectively, and then they make up dramatic moves in the show, right? The move that she plays, 3796, and the line that follows is super forcing. And if Ivanchuk had played that against Wolf, he probably would have won the game. The game that she goes on to beat Borgov here.
Yeah.
So go ahead. It's just epic.
It is. It's super nutty, and it's super fascinating because this adjournment gets called, and then we do kind of see that exact opposite play. Because fortunately, our good friend Towns is back. Towns is back in our lives, Danny. Funny,
Townsy.
I love
creeper. Do you like him? Do you hate him? You don't know.
You don't know. He's here. Randomly from a Kentucky, like Lexington Post or whatever. He's in Russia. But, you know, this is a fun scene because she gives this big nod to Mr. Shaibel. She's being interviewed by, you know, question here and there. She's asked about, you know, how she learned chess, all this stuff, gives a real good shout out to Mr. Shaibel. And then as she's walking her way, you know, Towns makes a call out. He's here, and they're back in the room. You know, this is a time where Beth needs to be studying, needs to be doing stuff. And of course, Towns is distracting her, but don't worry, because her good friend Benny is back in our lives. He's not that pissed off, just a little bit, but he's going to spend the rest of his money on this, what must be the most expensive international call in the 60s ever to Russia, which I'm assuming they allowed somehow, right. But he's there with the crew. The whole crew is there, Danny.
The whole crew is there. And not only that, like, they've got her back. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're going to work on this position and give her the best line to play. Right. You've got, who is there in the background? You've got Beltic. You've got Benny. Help me out here. Everybody. Right. Which, by the way, is the boys. Right. Matt and Mike. Right. The boys. Like,
the boys.
It's a little odd. It's not totally unrealistic, right? But it's a little odd that they're all suddenly in the same place.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. They're all randomly in New York, like in Benny's basement or whatever.
Right. That's a little bit just kind of funny, right? I will say this. It doesn't really matter. There would certainly have been enough strong players to help a guy like Fischer. You know, you had his team of people that were helping him prep and do stuff, you know? But the fact that it's like Beltic from Lexington, Matt and Mike, who Where the bleep are they from, by the way? Who knows, Matt and are they even real? Right, Matt and Mike. Like if we watch the whole show, have they ever had a conversation with someone who wasn't Beth? Like, can we confirm that?
I
Kidding,
don't
but,
I don't think so. I think just
all right,
Mrs. Wheelie, and that's it.
all
So.
right, it's funny. Anyway, so like you've got Benny. Anyway, it's just a little bit funny and odd, but either way, the point is the team is there, and it is a cool sort of inspirationally triumphant scene. You know that they're all going to work together and help Beth get the job done finally.
Got it. I will say I've been trying to figure out who else are other chess consultants. John Paul Atkinson and Ipep Rubinga were both chess consultants on this episode specifically.
Okay.
On IMDb. I don't know those people, but I'm sure there's others. They're just not in the IMDb, which is fascinating.
Was Kasparov listed?
Kasparov is not listed.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh no, he's there. Special consultant Gary Kasparov. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like I mean, because this is like such a high level chess like improvement and interesting way to like present the power of adjournment, the fact that they improve on a famous game between Ivanchuk and Patrick Wolf. I mean, I just don't know. I would have a super hard time believing that didn't have the direct influence of the hand of the king.
Let's see.
Mr. Gary Kasparov himself.
Other special consultants, Bruce Pandolfini.
Yep, Bruce Pandolfini. He was in episode 6. I told you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the local tournament director who comes out and gets her some Advil or whatever the stuff there and tells her she can't smoke.
Mm-hmm.
My boy Bruce, who I've been chatting with recently because, fun fact, we're bringing a Bruce bot to chess.com. Everyone loves the bots right now, the Beth Harmon bots. You can play against personalities that are kind of shaped around the chess level and the chess style of someone. And we've been working with Bruce, who, shout out to Bruce, by the way, 2021 is his 50th anniversary of when he became a professional chess coach. He told me this year. This is his 50th year and he's still coaching. And so we're going to release a Bruce Pandolfini bot soon and kind of have him on a show. And I've known Bruce for a very long time. If you don't know Bruce literally is a legend. Like, not only is basically the entire movie Searching for Bobby Fischer with Josh Waitzkin kind of based on him just as much as Josh, which is the coach who Ben Kingsley plays, the actor, right? That's based on Bruce Pandolfini. But he also was one of the first like commentators of like a massively followed chess match, which was Fischer's match versus Spassky in 72. He was a commentator for that. And he's just literally a legend. I mean, he was Fabiano Caruana's first chess coach, or at least one of them, right? Fabi now obviously the number one American and recently challenged Carlsen. So small digression, but you mentioned Bruce Pandolfini is listed in the IMDb, and he is an absolute legend. So
nice, boom. Yeah, so we get to it. I mean, there's a whole thing. They're going through every single move. What if he plays this? 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 And yeah, I guess up to you to break down the rest of the chess at this time.
Yeah, so the move G4. So everyone click the link. This is your last episode. Just do it. If you're listening in your car, do not click the link. You're driving.
You're
okay,
driving.
Focus on what you're doing. All right, but everyone else, click the link. And so again, if you click the link we gave, you'll see that G4 is actually the main line. And again, that is what Ivanchuk played against Wolf. You can actually, if you have the engine running at the chess.com analysis link, you can see the evaluation shift back toward black.
Mm-hmm.
But the move knight e6 is the best. And it's what Beth plays, right? It's what the team recommends. And there's a number of moves that can be played here. We're not going to go into it, like if he takes the knight, this and that. But ultimately, I've been letting the engine run, and I can say like they followed very well. Borgov pretty much plays what the computer thinks is best for black with rook a4,
mm-hmm.
which is a double attack on the e4 pawn. The knight on f6 and the rook hit the pawn.
Yep.
B3 is played though, and that's kind of like the key move for Beth. Like you let black take this pawn. And the reason is that now after the trade on d6, bishop takes e6 is forced, because if you take on d6 back, there's a move knight f8 check, which wins immediately, a fork of the king and queen.
Oh, got it.
So now this is kind of like, and I forget the exact body language, like you, it's kind of a cool inspirational scene. And you're sort of flashing back to like what all the boys said that they helped her prepare, like how he's kind of like looking at her after she plays moves, right? There's like the drama of like she's kind of surprising him. He has to play bishop takes e6. It's the only move to stop the fork. And after d takes e6, now you take back the knight. And the key is the move e7. That this move e7 is preparing to get a queen on e8, right? So white has gambited the pawn on e4 for this super powerful pass pawn on e7, right? Because if you do the material count, black is actually up a pawn in the position, but the e7 pawn is a monster.
Yeah.
So black plays d5, that again, if you let the computer think, is the best move. But this allows the move bishop c5 to overprotect the e7 pawn. And after queen to e8, queen f3, preparing multiple things, including queen f5 check and maybe the sacrifice we're going to see. The Borgov attacks the bishop on c5 with queen c6, and white just reinforces b4. She plays this move kind of quickly, and then Borgov, I remember, like, she kind of shuffles, body language just goes back to e8. And this is the big moment, right, where you see the whole idea of the sacrifice come to the thrilling end.
Yeah.
Queen f5 check forces the move king h8, everyone. The king has to go back. And the reason is that playing a move like g6, you would just win the knight for free if the pawn blocks the check.
Got it.
If the move queen to g6 would be played, white can trade on g6 with the queen, king takes, and then play rook takes f6, removing the knight so that on the next move you can get a new queen on e8. You know what? I'll even give the new link that I'm creating here as I analyze this. I'll save it, and so everyone can kind of see the variations I'm entering as they go. So after king h8, we get this move, queen takes f6, which is just crazy brilliant. G takes, rook takes, and the point is there's no way to stop rook f8 check, and the e7 pawn protects the f8 square. So Beth is going to be winning back all of her material, getting a new queen on e8, and winning the game in short order after a few moves, some checks, and eventually she finds safety. She's crushing Borgov, up a bishop and a rook, and the game is over.
Yep.
So just awesome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sort of layout of chess moves to kind of watch it being orchestrated and watch that analysis bar bop up and down until that critical point in which, you know, the game kind of turns. And there's a point in the match in which they say, you know, he's not doing what he's supposed to do,
right,
in this. And I think that's early on after the adjournment, in which, you know, if they were kind of talking about what the other, you know, match was going to be,
right, what the other possibilities were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, I think that's partly like the drama of saying, like, is he actually playing the best defense, the best line? I mean, I think that overall, like, the point is 96 found by the team is an improvement over Ivanchuk Wolf, and it sort of puts Borgov on his heels, and you can see he doesn't know what to do, right? And he gets Harmoned.
Yeah,
he gets Harmoned.
He gets Harmoned. He does offer a draw, though. Funny enough, which she, of course,
and I love the scene of, like, you know, a draw would be a great result for, you know, with the English accent, would be a great result for, you know, her journey and this and that against the world champion. But we know how much Beth Harmon likes to win.
That's
and
true.
She shakes her head, and oh no, she does not want to draw. So great, and yeah, so then she wins. Like, the crowd kind of goes crazy, right, when she's leaving, and we get these just final moments where you don't know what's next for Beth Harmon. What we do know is she puts on a beautiful white coat, sort of thing, right, and wanders the city. Do we want to? I mean, what else do we want to talk about before we bring it to those final moments of Beth Harmon in the Moskva Park?
I think that's really it. I mean, that beautiful white dress and coat that she has on, reminiscent of like a white queen, right? There's a lot of, you know, symbolism in the outfits that she wears throughout the series. We've talked about it before. I do love this scene. She's supposed to be going to the airport, heading home with her handler. But she says, you know, pull over the car. She wants to get out. She wants to walk in. And she sees all the chess players, which we see earlier, like everyone kind of in the park playing chess. And as she walks up, you know, she's sort of surrounded, and like they're honored that she's there. And the one gentleman offers to play a round of chess, and she sits down. And I just love the ending here. And who knows what happens to Beth? Nobody knows. Does she stay?
Let's play, right? That's what's the last thing she says. And yeah, her outfit is like, it's like Russian royalty. That's what I want to say, right? It's just like, it's a super classy, like she's like a princess almost, and that's why you set up this like scene of like, you don't know, like, does she want to go home? And then you've got the crazy Reddit threads of, was Beth Harmon a Russian spy all along, right? And now she's home, right? It's anyway, it's wild stuff. But yeah, so she's arrived, she did it. And so I want to share a little bit of the thoughts about the ending, because if you looked at what was your initial thought, I know now you've seen it a couple times, but at some point in the show, at least episodes 5 or 6, you didn't know what the ending was going to be, assuming you haven't read the book by Walter Travis. Again, great book. Give a shout out to that. We were called out on that in some of the comments. So again, just, you can read the book, but assuming you had no idea, like, would this have a dark ending or a happy ending? Right? At what point, what were you betting on?
I think I'm rooting for Beth the entire time.
Right.
I think that just because there is such a dark past to it, and even here, as you're going into this adjournment, like Town shows up, just like Cleo showed up, or Chloe Cleo, and showed up, and you're like, well, is this going to be a good thing or a bad thing for her? You actually don't know up until that point. And to me, I think it was the Benny call that really sort of, so I was like, okay, now it's go time, because you don't know. I mean, Beth has been in these situations before where she obviously has grown so much as a player. I think that learning so much about the past of what has happened, right? It's almost like she needed a win, right? I mean, it's like all this stuff she went through with a mom, with the home, with Mr. Shaibel in this episode, in this episode alone. It's like, to me, it's like almost it's her time. So I think I was rooting. I think that I knew that there was going to be a happy ending at the end of this, but even still, kind of up until that point, I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was asking because, again, like, the chess world was pretty split when it happened. I remember a tweet from Jan Nepomniachtchi, top Russian grandmaster. Shout out to Jan Nepo, as we often call him, and a friend of mine, and plays, does a lot of our events. But so Jan tweeted like that he's disappointed, and he kind of thought the ending was unrealistic given like all the scars and all the trauma and all the potential character traits, like the behavioral patterns that we've seen from this character, for her to like rise above and be victorious. He thought was kind of like unrealistic. And I said, I understood what he was saying, but I thought that was like partly what gave it a twist ending, because I would say at some point, even though I was rooting for Beth, I kind of thought that it would probably end with just knowing, I don't know, maybe it's just modern cinema, Motzi. I don't know. Like, what is it? I expected there to be a dark ending. I really did. And there wasn't. And so I told Jan, I said, honestly, like, I understand what you're saying, but I got to admit, that was partly what I kind of enjoyed about the ending, was I didn't see it coming. I didn't see that. I thought maybe she rises above, and, our protagonist eventually, defeats her rival. But I didn't know that. I didn't think it would be maybe as clean and inspirational as it ultimately was, right? That she overcame demons. She faced her past. She seems to have put the substance abuse behind her. She achieved this incredible feat, and she's like super happy. And just like this scene of like, it's like she's wearing this white coat, but it's like a scene of like light, right? It's like she's just like arrived, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it to be such a happy ending in that sense. So I would say that, while I understand like the perspective that maybe that was an interesting bow to tie on it, and Jan's point of view, like maybe an unrealistic bow, I kind of thought that was what made it kind of interesting, was I didn't see it coming in such a clean way. So I just wanted to say, I was curious your thoughts, because I think that was just, an interesting way to end it. And will it lead to a sequel? I don't know. They certainly leave it very open-ended. I think that whenever they do things like this, they always have to wait for the success, because ultimately in our world, money talks and everything else walks, as we know.
Yeah.
It was hugely successful. Will there be more? Who knows? But I will say that the ending caught me pleasantly by surprise, that it was so clean. And that was one of the things I actually liked about it, even though I understand Jan's point of view that maybe a character with this type of past hasn't seen the last of her demons. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always hard when you watch so many movies and they're like, oh, this rom-com's going to have a happy ending, and this one's going to have a happy ending, and like, oh, this, and then at the end there's a twist and someone stabs that person. It's like, oh, okay, like you're like, okay, great, and so I think this to me was a nice conclusion, because there was such a big struggle, right? Had Beth won one of those games earlier, then that wouldn't have been such an epic conclusion. But this is her third try at beating Borgov, and she's grown so much through the years and as a chess player and up until this point, and she's got a team behind her now. These are things that didn't happen in earlier matches where Borgov had those. He had that advantage. there. So to me, this was a very nice kind of conclusion. While it was nice, it is a limited series, as they say. They don't say season 1; they say a limited series. So as we could imagine, at least the initial thought going into this is that this is it. This is the end. And if this is how it ends, I am happy with it, Danny.
Yeah, I agree. And it was an awesome ride. This podcast was also quite the ride. We started off, we brought back Coffeehouse Blunders, Wild 2020. Turns out Dan gets COVID midway through. Didn't see that coming. Has a podcast. Is he going to die after that podcast? Nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
The Mott's squeezes every possible reference to the end game in the last end game. The end game of our podcast, season 2 is now. And we did it, man. We did it.
And that is another chapter in the Coffeehouse Blunders saga. Now, we may come back for a season 3. Danny and I have been floating around some ideas. We want to hear from you. Go to blunders.fm, leave a comment on the page there, hit a contact button, or leave a comment on the YouTube. We've been floating some ideas. We're not going to tell you what those ideas are, but Danny and I have been thinking about some stuff. So definitely keep the podcast floating around in your podcast player. But Danny, I want to thank you for your expertise in every single move and every single analysis from your real world perspective of living through a lot of this in your life. And I know that everyone that has listened to the podcast up until this point that I know has really enjoyed your perspective and a tiny bit of mine.
I don't think that's true at all. And I think that it has to be really noted again that even though I'm giving the chess breakdown, Mott's is the guy driving the ship, and he really put, frankly, more probably effort and prep into what chess we were going to break down, and then I sit down and act like I knew it all along. But yeah, it's been awesome, and all right, man. TGIF. Assuming a lot of people are listening to this on a Friday when we record it. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. And like Mott said, please leave a comment, give us feedback, share the podcast, please. It's a lot of fun when people find it. We love it when people see the content and even dive into the first season. And thank you, Motzi, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and appreciate you bearing with me. Now, I will say, if you want to stick around for a special end game, you can stick around after the credit roll here with a little music outro as Danny breaks down my first game in over 2 years with my good friend and listener of the show, Frank Kruger, as you see that I crush him. And I'll link to that in the show notes. But thanks everyone for hanging out. And this has been yet another Coffeehouse Blunders. All right, and we're back. And Danny, I just linked you to my first chess game on chess.com.
OMG.
In 2
Twist
years.
Ending. How is Frank doing, by the way? Are you guys still doing your podcast?
Oh, yeah. Merge Conflict. Okay. Every single week, every Monday releases.
Cool.
It's going
Merge
good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know you've also got the one with our boy Rivette.
Yep.
And so you're a podcast. Okay, so here we go. You're developing your pieces, first of all. Love it. Love the knights out. Bishop G4, sons out, guns out, pawns out, knights out. That's the chess way we do that. Okay, so D5, a little bit too aggressive. If we go to move 5 from our boy Frank, he's opening the center before his king has found safety, and that's going to come back to bite him. You don't do that against my boy Motzi. H3. Bishop E6. So now he backs up, which note that you don't miss a beat. You recognize he unpins your knight and you gobble that pawn, baby girl.
Nom, nom, nom.
I love that. Queen F6. Not Frank's best work.
No.
D4. Look at you, dude. You are playing well, though, jokes aside. Like, big center or go home, I like to say. Bring the knights out. You're developing your pieces.
Yep.
I want to believe that at some point you're going to get castled. Queen H5 is the first move by you that I'm not a huge fan of, because at this point, you just need to get the king out of the way, because the position's about to blow open, and the sooner that king is gone, that E1 square is available for your rook and not your leader, you're going to be in great shape. So Queen H5 is a little risky by you. G6, Queen E2, B5. Okay, wow. Okay, your question or no?
No. I mean, I will say this: you'll see me castle later. But much, much later, because I got myself in trouble. What I read when I go back and I look at H5, so I move 9 here and I have the analysis board in the show notes.
Queen H5, yeah.
Queen H5. When I look at that, it actually takes me a significant amount of time to castle in this game.
Right.
And to get that king a move in. And I realized looking back at the game that is when maybe I should have played that move.
Right.
So
No, yeah, a good point. And right then was the key moment, because after that, after G6, well, there's a tempo on your queen. You can't castle. You got to move your queen. Then he plays B5, which is a tempo on your bishop, and you got to deal with that. You actually could have taken the pawn on B5, believe it or not, and then queen takes, which would have attacked his king and his bishop. But either way, what I'm saying is I agree with your thought process, even if some of the moves, aren't the best. Like overall, you were right. Like after you miss that chance to castle, he attacks your queen, he attacks your bishop, then he takes the pawn on E4, and you got to deal with that. So you take with the queen. So your mindset became very much about all the tempi. But I would say overall, the same lesson would be for Frank if he was the one here, right? Like instead of the move bishop D5, for example, on move 12, he should be playing a move like knight E7, like develop his knight, defend the position like the C6 pawn. And what does knight E7 prepare? For him to get castled, right? So if I was to say like an overarching lesson for both of you, which is very common for players of this level, is, don't underestimate how critical that is, because with more accurate moves, you both could have been in more trouble. Frank, even much, much more so than you. But you take on D5 with the queen, then you win the knight, and totally can't begrudge that, because at this point you shouldn't castle. You should take that free piece because of how much the position has changed. And then you take another bishop. So you were like Pac-Man. This is like, speaking of which, by the way, we got this old school, like big old like joystick Pac-Man that I hooked up to our big TV with like an adapter with like the yellow and red, whatever auxiliary cables into like an HDMI. Mm-hmm. And the girls are obsessed with Pac-Man. I love it.
That's awesome.
So then queen E6 is played and you trade queens. And so at this point, you've done a great job because you're up so many pieces. Oh, and then you fork him on D6. You are a nasty, dirty dog. You are all over it. At this point on move 20, it doesn't matter if you castle or not. You've won the house, as they say.
Yeah.
And it continues to be good. Eventually you do get castled, I see. And you take it home. Good stuff, man. I mean, honestly, I think that the lesson was for sure Frank opened the center way too aggressively, needs to prioritize development and getting castled. You kind of could have lost the thread because you didn't do it, but overall his path was set for doom because he continued to play aggressively and never got his king safe.
Yep. So it was a good one. He did lose on time, but I think that we all know that he really just lost.
Yeah, you were up plus. You were up a measly 25 points according to the computer in the final position. So.
Yeah, my favorite move was the fork. I think that was, I saw it, and I think that doing a lot of the chess analysis on the show, why I kind of bring this up and looking and watching a lot of what we've done is that, there's these opportunities on the board that sometimes present themselves. So taking a little bit of time to find it. And I think that was, I don't really remember myself actively engaging to have a fork like that and look and to get material. So I do think that even though I haven't played chess for a long time, I've watched a lot of analysis that you've done on chess.com and on Twitch. And of course, and breaking down some of these games in the Queen's Gambit, making me realize of how the pieces move across the board and the opportunity that they can present themselves. Because in that move, I could have done some other things. I could have brought out my bishop, or I could have done some other move there, castled for instance.
But you had a heads up. Yeah.
So anyways.
No, I great description. And I think sometimes that's how chess goes. Like people get really into it and then you kind of fall out. Then maybe like the chess edutainment that is online kind of piques your interest again. And then you come back and maybe you're looking at the board a little bit, differently. And I think that's a really good description. And the fact that it's no disrespect to Frank. You're, obviously better player, more experienced. But I think despite my kind of critiques of you playing Queen H5, like overall, that was like, you just kind of crushed it, right? And you didn't miss almost any of your tactical opportunities. You saw the fork, you won the other, you won the bishop. So I think that that's a good example of just kind of having a clear head, seeing the tactics in front of you, not deciding what you're going to do in advance, but really just seeing the board in front of you. And way to go, man. Seriously. Chess expert Mots, James Montemagno.
There you have it. Well, thank you, Danny, for breaking that down. And I'm glad that I did okay in your eyes. That's all. I can die happy. My end game is now complete. So
you didn't need to do it, but you did it anyway,
That's what I do.
Love you, man. This has been fun.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.